Chapter 5 The Art of Dais Education. The time had come for me to enter a place of higher learning, but South Central's education system was cloning and graduating students who could barely read, write, or reason. It really didn't matter which elementary school I was enrolled in, because I was destined to be a Dais educated. I've coined the term Dais education to depict the abnormal, impaired, and diseased knowledge I received in life and from the public school system. The first school my mother enrolled me in was Menlo Avenue Elementary School, several blocks from where I lived. I braved the surroundings with a great deal of curiosity and eagerness to learn. My willingness to learn was somewhat hampered by Miss Atkins, the teacher assigned to the classroom. She and I would bump heads while I was there. Miss Atkins was a rosy-cheeked, short, stout Caucasian woman with her hair fashioned in a bun on the back of her head. She wore horn-rimmed glasses with a shiny silver chain hanging slightly in front circling her head. She felt it was her duty to punish children in her classroom. The most popular method of punishment at the time was called feral discipline. A wooden ruler was used to repeatedly beat the inside of a child's hand. The child was told to stand before the entire class with palms up and endure the pain without moving. If the child moved, the discipline would start over. Just about every day I witnessed children squirming in pain as tears rolled down their cheeks. Just watching the ruler whacking a classmate's palm made me wince. Though I cannot remember a boy or a girl crying out, not one of them refused to accept the punishment. When it was time to be punished, each one walked mechanically in front of the class and assumed the position. A biblical beating from my mother was one thing, but a school beating I refused to accept. I would run if I had to. It was inevitable to be called to stand before the class to be feral discipline. One day a classmate asked if he could borrow some paper, and I said yes. Miss Atkins saw me passing the paper and assumed I was playing around. Her voice resonated like a megaphone when she yelled, "Stanley Williams, report to the front of the class." The room fell silent. I could hear my classmates breathing. I refused with a single firm no. Someone in the classroom gasped so loud I had to look around. Miss Atkins' face turned beet red in disbelief and anger. Behind her desk, she used a more authoritative tone. "Stan, I want you up here in front of this class right now." Again, I refused. My refusal was a stinging blow to her frail ego. I had defied her system of voluntary discipline. Visibly shaking, she pointed a stubborn finger and ordered me to report to the principal's office. I got up slowly and swaggered to the office. The principal, a tall, slender man, was pleasant enough, but his lecture was about an hour long. I sat there listening without saying a word. The principal decided not to call my mother and told me to return to class. After that clash with Miss Atkins, my classmates seemed to warm up to me. I began to make friends and was no longer just a new arrival. I was the hero who had challenged the Dragon Lady. From that day forward, she never attempted to discipline me, but we did butt heads over other issues. In her class, reading and writing seemed to be prohibited, but we were provided mounds of clay, paper mache puzzles, and all kinds of non-educational items. Pencils and erasers were nowhere to be found. There were shelves of books that students did not read. They seemed to be there just to decorate the classroom. I got on Miss Atkins' nerves, bothering her each day about letting me read a book. The more she refused, the more determined I was to read the literature on those shelves. I was a darn good reader for my age. At home, there was a box filled with books. Sometimes I would dump the books on the floor and sit in the middle of the pile trying to read everything. Often, my mother would help me with the spelling and the pronunciation of words. One of my favorite books was an encyclopedia on dogs with numerous color photos. I could read for hours about different breeds of dogs. Reading was a pastime I truly enjoyed and a way of escaping from my often righteous thoughts. In my reading world, there was no poverty, no discrimination, no violence, no racism, no pain, and no Cynthia. Thievery became necessary to allow me to pilfer a book off the school library shelf and avoid being busted by Miss Atkins. My partner in crime was Sheila, a chubby black girl with a short, curly natural, large brown eyes, dimples, and a contagious smile. Together, we pretended to be working on a project while taking turns reading from a book held in our laps. The first time Miss Atkins caught us reading, she thought there must be some hanky-panky going on. When we were made to stand up, the 2 books fell off our laps on the floor. Miss Atkins had a fit, storming out of the classroom shouting, "I'm calling your mother, I'm calling your mother." This, phoning your mother, was a scenario that was played out with me 3 or 4 times a week, twice a day. If Miss Atkins had her way, instead of calling my mother, I'd been handcuffed by police and escorted to jail. Perhaps because she sensed my potential, she was driven to hinder or obliterate my intentions. To all who would listen to her outbursts, Miss Atkins would paint a false portrait of me, assassinating my character, behavior, mental state, and ability to learn. Perplexed, I watched in horror as she performed a masterful act of fake humanity and concern for me in the presence of my mother. To parents, she was the epitome of what all teachers should be. But I had her number. I knew she was wicked. All I wanted to do was become educated, not to battle with the beraged teacher over my constitutional right to read school books. The odds were stacked against me. Miss Atkins' authority made her my nemesis. She had the principal, teachers, parents, my mother, and every janitor in her corner. Who would believe me? Who could I talk to? The more my mother came up to the school to chastise me, the more it strengthened Miss Atkins' assertion that I was a very disruptive child. Whether Miss Atkins busted me, Sheila, or other classmates who joined us in a clandestine study program, she would only call my mother. For every minute my mother spent away from work addressing this conflict, money was deducted from her paycheck. Perhaps the teacher was aware of that, but she viewed me as just another little darky whom she openly predicted would fail in life. In her warnings to other students about examples of bad behavior, she pointed a finger at me. "Look at Stanley. He is not what you want to be." If ever a teacher needed psychological testing to be allowed to teach children, she was a prime candidate. It was a surprise several months later when Miss Atkins implemented a reading and writing period in her class, but we were still largely on our own. As usual, she sat behind her desk, crocheting, her head tilted, looking over her glasses at us, mostly at me. She seemed to enjoy humming the hymn, "Shall we gather at the river, the beautiful river." It was odd that such an oppressive person would enjoy singing a church song. Fortunately, before she was able to have me expelled, I was transferred to another school. Although there were no farewells, I knew I would miss Sheila. Now I was able to breathe, a breath of fresh air. Cynthia and I were enrolled in Normandy Avenue Elementary School and the adjacent daycare center. Each school day, after kissing our mother on the cheek, we headed toward the day center, where Cynthia and I stayed before and after school until 4 p.m. The breakfast and the lunches tasted much better than the school's cafeteria food. All in all, daycare was a nice, clean place to be, with a lot of activities for children. There were 2 memorable figures who worked at the center, Miss Blue and Miss Davis. Both of these black women were exceptionally kind to all the children. It was Miss David who comforted me when I had a run-in with the door and the monkey bars. She accompanied me to a nearby clinic where I was patched up. In her early 20s, Miss Davis was tall, slender, cinnamon colored, with a curly, brownish gold afro. She would drive up in a small black convertible sports car, usually wearing brightly colored tennis attire with a tennis bag over her shoulder. Her tennis dress was skimpier than a miniskirt, but I wasn't complaining. Watching her practice hitting tennis balls off the wall raised my interest in female anatomy to a new level. Whether retrieving balls or sitting on a milk crate, I admired her sleek movement as her skirt hiked up to unbelievable heights. She had a preachy saying, "We sisters are black queens, and we have to keep our bodies firm and beautiful." Amen to that. In total contrast, Miss Blue was in her late 40s, perhaps early 50s. She was short with smooth brown skin and bluish permed hair. Miss Blue was sweet as pie and loved reading stories to us. When I did get into trouble, she tried to rescue me from the school's impulse to expel me. Miss Blue would rather control me than threaten punishment. In a way, her religious quotes and sermons were similar to my grandmother's, but she always found something good to say about me. I remember sitting between Miss Blue and my mother as Miss Blue bragged about how smart I was. Her words were like sweet droplets of honey poured down my throat. Encouragement was an element I didn't receive enough in life. In school, I maintained between a B plus, and an A average. My ability to read, write, and retain knowledge was evident with each passing year. So far, my efforts and behavior were an A plus. I occasionally got into a few scrimmages, but what black man child didn't rumble and tumble as a youngster? It was rare for me to fight a girl, but this girl named Janice was no ordinary female. I was about 4 feet 6 inches and Janice stood about 6 feet tall. She was broad at the shoulders with a hairstyle like buckwheat on the Little Rascals and a mean expression.